Hello and welcome to BookSpot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Rewards and Fairies by Rudyard Kipling. The Thousandth Man. One man in 1,000, Solomon says, will stick more close than a brother, and it's worthwhile seeking him half your days if you find him before the other. 999 depend on what the world sees in you, but the 1,000th man will stand your friend with the whole round world agin you. 'Tis neither promise nor prayer nor show will settle the finding for ye. 999 of 'em go by your looks or your acts or your glory. But if he finds you and you find him, the rest of the world don't matter, for the 1,000th man will sink or swim with you in any water. You can use his purse with no more shame than he uses yours for his spendings, and laugh and mention it just the same as though there had been no lendings. 999 of 'em call for silver or gold in their dealings, but the 1,000th man, he's worth 'em all because you can show him your feelings. His wrong's your wrong, his right's your right, in season or out of season. Stand up and back it all men's sights, for that was your only reason. 999 can't bide the shame or mocking or laughter, but the 1,000th man will stand by your side to the gallows foot and after. Simple Simon. Cattywow came down the steep lane with his 5-horse timber tug. He stopped by the woodlump at the back gate to take off the brakes. His real name was Brabden, but the first time the children had met him, years and years ago, he had told them he was carting wood, and it sounded so exactly like Cattywow in his dialect that they never called him anything else. "Hi!" Una shouted from the top of the woodlump where they had been watching the lane. "What are you doing? Why weren't we told?" "They've just sent for me," Cattywow answered. "There's a middlin' big log sticking in the dirt at Rabbit Shaw, and," he flicked his whip back along the line, "so they've sent for us all." Dan and Una threw themselves off the woodlump almost under Black Sailor's nose. Cattywow never let them ride the big beam that made the body of the timber tug, but they hung on behind while their teeth thuttered. The wood road beyond the brook climbs at once into the woods, and you see all the horses' backs rising one above the other like moving stairs. Cattywow strode ahead in his sackcloth woodman's petticoat, belted at the waist with a leather strap, and when he turned and grinned, his red lips showed under the sackcloth-colored beard. His cap was sackcloth too, with a flap behind to keep twigs and bark out of his neck. He navigated the tug among pools of heather water that splashed in their faces, and through clumps of young birches that slashed at their legs, and when they hit an old toadstooled stump, they never knew whether it would give way in showers of rotten wood or jar them back again. At the top of Rabbit Shaw, 6 men and a team of horses stood round a 40-foot oak log in a muddy hollow. The ground was about poached and stoached with sliding hoof marks, and a wave of dirt was driven up in front of the butt. "What did you want a barrier for this way?" said Cattywow. He took his broadaxe and went up to the log, tapping it. "She's sticked fast," said Bunny Lucknow, who managed the other team. Cattywow unfastened the 5 wise horses from the tug. They cocked their ears forward, looked, and shook themselves. "I believe Sailor knows," Dan whispered to Una. "He do," said a man behind them. He was dressed in flour sacks like the others, and he leaned on his broadaxe. But the children, who knew all the wood gangs around, knew he was a stranger. In his size and oily hairiness, he might have been Bunny Lucknow's brother, except that his brown eyes were as soft as a spaniel's, and his rounded black beard, beginning close under them, reminded Una of the walrus in The Walrus and the Carpenter. "Don't he just about now," he said shyly, and shifted from one foot to the other. "Yes, what Cattywow can't get out of the woods must have roots growing to her," Dan had heard old Cobden say a few days before. At that minute, Puck pranced up, picking his way through the pools of black water in the ling. "Look out!" cried Una, jumping forward. "He'll see you, Puck!" Me and Miss Robin, pretty middlin' well acquainted, the man answered with a smile that made them forget all about walruses. This is Simon Cheney's, Puck began and cleared his throat. Shipbuilder of Ryeport, burgess of said town, and the only— "Oh, look ye, there's a knowin' one," said the man. Cattywow had fastened his team to the thin end of the log and was moving them about with his whip till they stood at right angles to it, heading downhill. Then he grunted. The horses took the strain, beginning with Sailor next to the log like a tug-of-war team, and dropped almost to their knees. The log shifted a nail's breadth in the clinging dirt with a noise like a giant's kiss. "You're getting her!" Simon Cheney slapped his knees. Hang on, lads, or she'll master you. Ah!" Sailor's left hind hoof had slipped on heather tuft. One of the men whipped off his sack apron and spread it down. They saw Sailor feel for it and recover. Still the log hung, and the team grunted in despair. "Hi!" shouted Cattywow, and brought his dreadful whip twice across Sailor's loins with the crack of a shotgun. The horse almost screamed as he pulled that last extra ounce which he did not know was in him. The thin end of the log left the dirt and rasped on dry gravel. The butt ground round like a buffalo in his wallow. Quick as an axe cut, Luke Norris snapped on his 5 horses, and sliding, trampling, jingling, and snorting, they had the whole thing out on the heather. "That's the very first time I've knowed you to lay into Sailor to hurt him," said Luke now. "It is," said Cattywow, and passed his hand over the 2 wheels. "But I'd 'a' laid my own brother open at that pinch. Now we'll twitch her down to the hill a piece. She lies just about right, and get her home by the low road. My team will do it, Bunny. You bring the tug along. Mind out." He spoke to the horses, who tightened the chains. The great log half rolled over and slowly drew itself out of the sight downhill, followed by the wood gang and the timber tug. In half a minute there was nothing to see but the deserted hollows of torn-up dirt, the birch undergrowth still shaking, and the water draining back into the hoof-prints. "You hear him?" Simon Cheney asked. "He cherished his horse, but he'd have laid him open in that pinch." "Not for his own advantage," said Puck quickly. "'Twas only to shift the log." "I reckon every man born a woman has his log to shift in the world. If so be you're hitting at any old Frankie's doing, he never hit beyond reason or without reason," said Simon. "I never said a word against Frankie," Puck retorted with a wink at the children. "And if I did, do it lie in your mouth to contest my say-so, seeing how you— Why, don't it lie in my mouth, seeing I was the first which knowed Frankie for all what he was?" The burly sack-clad man puffed down a little at cool little Puck. "Yes, and the first which was set out to poison him, Frankie, on the high seas." Simon's angry face changed to a sheepish grin. He waggled his immense hands, but Puck stood off and laughed mercilessly. "But let me tell you, Master Rabin," he pleaded. "I've heard the tale. Tell the children here. Look, Dan, look, Una," Puck's straight brown finger leveled like an arrow. "There's the only man that ever tried to poison Sir Francis Drake." "Oh, Master Robin, 'tidn't fair. You've the vantage of all of us you're upbringin' by hundreds of years. Stands to nature you know all the tales against everyone." He turned his soft eyes so helplessly on Una that she cried, "Stop ragging him, Puck. You know he didn't really." "I do, but why are you so sure, little maid?" Because he doesn't look it," said Una stoutly. "I thank you," said Simon to Una. I was always trustable like with children if you let me alone, you double handful of mischief." He pretended to heave up his axe on Puck, and then his shyness took over again. "Where did you know Sir Francis Drake?" said Dan, not relishing being called a child. "At Ryeport, to be sure," said Simon, and seeing Dan's bewilderment, repeated it. "Yes, but look here," said Dan. "Drake, he was a Devon man, so the song says." "And ruled the Devon seas," Una went on. "That's what I was thinking, if you don't mind." Simon Cheney's seemed to mind very much indeed, for he swelled in silence while Puck laughed. "Ha!" he burst out at last. "I heard that talk too. If you listen to them West Country folk, you'll listen to a pack of lies. I believe Frankie was born somewhere out west among the Shires, but his father had to run for it when Frankie was a baby because the neighbors was wishful to kill him, d'ye see. He run to Chatham, old Parson Drake did, and Frankie was brought up in old hulks of a ship moored in the Medway River, same as might have been the Rother. Brought up at sea, you might say, before he could walk on land, nigh Chatham in Kent. And ain't Kent back door to Sussex? And don't that make Frankie Sussex? Course it do. Devon, man. Bah, those West Country boats, they're always fishing in other folks' water. I beg your pardon, said Dan. I'm sorry. No call to be sorry. You've been misled. I met Frankie at Ryport when my uncle, that was the shipbuilder there, pushed me off his wharf edge onto Frankie's ship. Frankie had put in from Chatham with his rudder spluttered and a man's arm, Moon's that'd be, broken at the tiller. Take this boy aboard and drown him, says my uncle, and I'll mend your rudder piece for love. What did your uncle want you drowned for? Said Una. That was only his fashion to say so, same as Master Robin. I'd a foolishness in my head that ships could be builded out of iron. Yes, iron ships. I'd made me a little toy one, iron plates beat out thin, and she floated a wonder. But my uncle, being a Burgess of Rye and a shipbuilder, he prenticed me to Frankie to the fetchin' trade to cure this foolishness. What was the fetchin' trade? Dan interrupted. Fetchin' poor Flemishers and Dutchmen out of the Low Countries into England. The King of Spain, you see, he was burnin' 'em in those parts for to make papishers. So Frankie, he fetched 'em away to our parts, and a risky trade it was. His master wouldn't never touch it while he lived, but he left his ship to Frankie when he died, and Frankie turned her into this fetchin' trade. Outrageous, cruel, hard work. On besom black nights, boltin' back and forth off they Dutch roads with shoals on all sides, and have to hark out for the frish, 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 like the Spanish golliwops's oars creepin' up on you. Frankie'd have the tiller, and Moon'd peer forth at the bows, our lantern under his skirts, till the boat we was lookin' for'd blot up out of the dark, and we'd lay hold and haul aboard whoever 'twas, man, woman, or babe, and around we'd go again, and the wind be hewlin' like the kite in our riggin', and they'd drop into the hold and praise God for happy deliverance till they was all sick. I had nigh a year at it. We must have fetched off, 100 poor folk, I reckon. Outrageous bold, too, Frankie growed to be. Outrageous cunnin' he was. Once we was as near as nothin' nipped by a tall ship off Tergo Sands in a snowstorm. She had the wind of us and spooned straight before us, shootin' all bow guns. Frankie fled inshore, smack for the beach, till he was atop of the first breakers. Then he hove his anchor out, which nigh tore our bows off, but it twitched us round end for end into the wind, you see, and we clawed off them sands like a drunk man rubbin' along a tavern bench. When we could see, the Spanisher was laid flat along the breakers with the snows whitin' on his belly. He thought he could go where Frankie went. What happened to the crew? Said Una. We didn't stop, Simon answered. There was a very little new baby in our hold, and the mother, she wanted to get some dry bed middlin' quick. We run to Dover and said nothin'. Was Sir Francis Drake very much pleased? Hard alive, maid, he'd no head to his name in those days. He was just an outrageous, valiant, crop-haired, tut-mouthed boy, roaring up and down the narrow seas with his beard not yet quilled out. He made a laughin' stock of everything that day, and he hold our lives in the bite of his arm all the besom black night among they Dutch sands, and we had jumped overside to behove him any one time, all of us. Then why did you try to poison him? Una asked wickedly, and Simon hung his head like a shy child. Oh, that was when he set me to make a puddin', because our cook was hurted. I done my utmost, but she all fetched adrift in the bag, and all the more I biled the bits of her, the less she favoured any fashion of puddin'. Moon, he chawed and chammed his piece, and Frankie chawed and chammed his'n, and no words to it, he took me by the ear and walked me out over the bow end, and him and Moon hove the puddin' at me on the bowsprit, gub by gub, something cruel hard. Simon rubbed his hairy cheek. Next time you bring me anything, says Frankie, you bring me cannon shot, and I'll know what I'm gettin'. But as for poisonin', he stopped, and the children laughed. Of course you didn't, said Una. Oh, Simon, we do like you. I was always likable with children. His smile crinkled up through the hair around his eyes. Simple Simon, they used to call me through our yard gates. Did Sir Francis mock you? Dan asked. Ah, no, he was gentle-born. Laugh he did, he was always laughin', but not so as to hurt a feather. And I loved him. I loved him before England knew him, or Queen Bess, she broke his heart. But he hadn't really done anything when you knew him, had he? Una insisted. Armadas and those things, I mean? Simon pointed to the scars and scrapes left by Cattiwow's great log. You tell me that good ship's timber never done nothing against winds and weather since her upspringin', and I'll confess ye that young Frankie never done nothing neither. Nothing? He adventured and suffered and made shift on they Dutch sands as much in any one time a month as ever he had occasion to do in a half year on the high seas afterward. And what was his tools? A coaster boat, a little box of walty plankin', and some few fathom of feeble rope held together and made able by him sole. He drawed our spirits up in our bodies same as chimney towel draws a flame. 'Twas in him, and it comed out all times and shapes. I wonder did he ever imagine what it was going to be, tell himself stories about it, said Dan with a flush. I expect so. We mostly do, even when we're grown. But being Frankie, he took good care to find out beforehand what his fortune might be. And I rightly ought to tell him this piece? Simon turned to Puck, who nodded. My mother, she was just a fair woman, but my aunt, her sister, she had gifts by inheritance laid up in her, Simon began. Oh, that'll never do, said Puck, for the children stared blankly. Do you remember what Robin promised the widow Whitgift so long as her blood and get lasted? Yes, there was always to be one of them that could see farther through a millstone than most, answered Dan promptly. Well, Simon's aunt's mother, said Puck slowly, married the widow's blind son on the marsh, and Simon's aunt was the one chosen to see farthest through millstones. Do you understand? That's what I was getting at, said Simon, but you're so desperate quick. My aunt, she knew what was coming to people. My uncle, being a burgess of Rye, he counted all such things odious, and my aunt, she couldn't be got to practice her gifts hardly at all, because it hurted her head for a week afterwards. But when Frankie heard she had him, he was all for nothing till she foretold on him, till she looked in his hand to tell his fortune, you see. One time we was at Rye, she come aboard with my other shirt and some apples, and he fair beazled the life out of her about it. Oh, you'll be twice wed and die childless, she said, and pushes his hand away. That's the woman's part, he says. What'll come to me, and he thrusts it back under her nose. Gold past belief or counting, she said. Let me go, lad. Sink the gold, he says. What'll I do, mother? He coaxed her like no woman could well withstand. I seen him with it, even when they were seasick. If you will have it, she says at last, ye shall have it. You'll do many things, and eatin' and drinkin' with a dead man beyond the world's end will be the least of 'em. For you'll open a road from east unto the west, and back again, and you'll bury your heart with your best friend by that roadside, and the road you open none shall shut so long as you're let quiet in your grave. And if I'm not, he said, why then, she said, Sim's iron ships will be sailing the land. Now ha' done with this foolishness. Where's Sim's shirt? He couldn't fetch no more out of her, and when we come up from the cabin, he stood mazed-like by the tiller, playin' with an apple. My sorrow, says my aunt, d'ye see that, the great world lyin' in his hand, little and round like an apple? Why, 'tis one you gived him, I said. To be sure, she said, 'tis just an apple. And she went ashore with her hand to her head. It always hurted her to show her gifts. Him and me puzzled over that talk plenty. It sticked in his mind quite extravagant. The very next time we slipped out for some fetchin' trade, we met Mr. Stennon's boat over by Calais Sands, and he warned us that the Spanishers had shut down all their Dutch ports against us English, and their gallowopses was out picking our boats off like flies off hogs' backs. Mr. Stennon's, he run for shore, but Frankie he held on a piece, knowing that Mr. Stennon was jealous of our good trade. Over by Dunkirk, a great gore-bellied Spanisher with the cross on his sails came ramping at us. We left him all their bare seas to conquest in. Looks like this road was going to be shut pretty soon, says Frankie, humoring her at the tiller. I'll have to open that other one of your aunt foretold of. The Spanisher's crowding down us middle quick, I says. No odds, said Frankie. He'll have the inshore tide against him. Did your aunt say I was to lie quiet in my grave forever? "Till my iron ships sail the dry land," I says. "That's foolishness," he says. "Who cares where Frankie Drake makes a hole in the water now or 20 years from now?" Spanisher kept mucking on more and more canvas. I told him so. "He's feeling the tide," was all he says. "If he was among Tergo's sand with this wind, we'd be picking his bones proper. I'd give my heart to have all their tall ships there some night before a north gale and me to windward. There'd be gold in my hands then. Did your aunt say she saw the world settin' in my hands, Sim?" "Yes, but 'twas just an apple," I says, and he laughed like he always did at me. "Do you ever feel minded to jump overside and be done with everything?" he asks after a while. "No. What water comes aboard's too wet as it is," I says. "The Spanisher's going about." "I told you," he says, never looking back. "He'll give us the Pope's blessing as he swings. Come down off that rail. There's no knowing where stray shots may hit." So I came down off the rail and leaned against it, and the Spanisher he ruffled round the wind, and his port lids opened all red inside. "Now, what'll happen to my road if they don't let me lie quiet in my grave?" he says. "Does your aunt mean there's 2 roads to be found and kept open? Or what does she mean? I don't like that talk about t'other road. Do you believe in your iron ships, Sam?" He knowed I did, so I only nodded, and he nodded back again. "Anybody but me'd call you a fool, Sim," he says. "Lie down, here comes the Pope's blessing." The Spanisher gave us his broadside as he went about. They all fell short except one that smack smooth hit the rail behind me, and I felt most wonderful cold. "Be you hit anywhere to signify?" he says. "Come over to me." "Oh, Lord, Mr. Drake," I says, "my legs won't move." And that was the last I spoke for months. "Why, what had happened?" cried Una and Dan together. "The rail had jarred me in here like." Simon reached back behind him clumsily. "From my shoulders down, I didn't act no shape. Frankie carried me piggyback to my aunt's house, and I lay bedrid and tongue-tied while she rubbed me day and night, month in and month out. She had faith in rubbing with the hands. Perhaps she put some of her gifts into it, too. Last of all, something loosed itself in my poor back, and lo, I was whole restored again, but kitten feeble." "Where's Frankie?" I says, thinking it had been a longish while abed. "Downwind among the Dons months ago," said my aunt. "When can I go after him?" I says. "Your duties to your town and trade now," she says. "Your uncle died last Michaelmas, and he've left you and me the yard, so no more iron ships, mind you." "What?" says I. "And you the only one that's be left in them?" "Maybe I do still," she says, "but I'm a woman before I'm a Whitgift, and wooden ships is what England needs us to build. I lay it on you to do so." That's why I never touched iron since that day, not to build a toy ship of. I never even drawed a draft of one of my pleasure of evenings. Simon smiled down on them all. "Whitgift blood is terrible resolute on the she side," said Puck. "Did you ever see Francis Drake again?" Dan asked. And we'll find out if he sees Francis Drake again next time.